Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author. The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. We do have the advanced course out now. Came out about 6 weeks ago or so. Theory of DFS for advanced players. It's 10 new chapters, as well as many Excel tools that James McCool has developed to make your process more accurate, more time efficient, more systematic, help you build those plus EV lineups. So go over to theoryofdfs.com and pick it up. Join with me, as usual, during the NFL season every week. Neil Orfield from Stochastic, the host of the High Stakes podcast. On the contrary, the ownership show that every time I turn it on, there's a tournament strategy show. You're on. You're in everything, NFL wise at least. And looking at the results DB, you didn't do awful.
No, I was actually doing really well like all day. So I played the main slate, I played the early slate, I played the late slate. I had sweats in all of them fairly late, but ended up losing money on all of them, of course. So not my best day, but also pretty close to break even, so can't complain too much.
Yeah, you put 150 lineups into the millie. I put 40, I believe. And our 190 lineups that we played, my cash lineup beat them all.
Really? I guess that's not a surprise.
I
Yeah,
I played the collusion lineup apparently. The lineup to 221.86 whatever lineup with Allen, Fournette, Hall, Olave, Lockett, Godwin, Higbee, Wilson, Cowboys. Uh, yeah, I won 100% of my head-to-heads.
nice.
I didn't
Wow.
lose. I mean, there were some ties in there, but yeah, 100% of head-to-heads. Uh, I mean, that lineup came in 90th place in the millie.
Yeah, that's a cash lineup. Was it duplicated in the millie?
Yeah, 270 something times or whatever.
Oh, well, that explains why I got pushed back so much.
Right. I mean, I didn't have it in the millie, but I'm just saying that lineup was in there. I mean, it would if I would have just played that lineup in all the contests I was in, I would have I think I would have 5x or 7x all of my. I on DraftKings I had about 7,000 in entries. I would have gotten like 35,000 or something. I would have tied with three ways with McLovin in like one of the power sweeps for first place. That would have been like 15 grand. I think it tied in the red zone like three or four times, and that would have been like another like 8 grand or something. Like I
Blender,
would have.
this is why you always just play your cash lineup in the high stakes.
Well, I did. I play the thing I do with my cash lineup is that noon on whenever they post like the 14th version of like it's under 1,000 entries, like the $5 huddle 470 man, right? Like stuff like that because of like overlay and latecomers and typically having bad lineups. I just throw my cash lineup just throw into every $12 Hail Mary, whatever that. Okay, throw it in the $9, whatever the hell, 160, whatever they throw out there. So I was able to get some returns and quintuple ups or whatever, but and then I lost on FanDuel on a 3v3 that I switched. Uh, only I mean I lost like 50% on FanDuel because I still won 45% of my head to heads. But props I crushed. So I mean like between DraftKings and FanDuel, I made like 2 grand on like 10,000 of volume, which is a 20%
Nice.
return. Okay,
Yeah, I'll take
okay,
that.
not bad. And then I went 19-7 on props, and like all of my high value props all hit. And
Nice.
and and some of them are correlated, so I have like 5 picks on some of them. So like yeah, so I made
Wow.
I made a little over 10 grand on Prize Picks and Underdog. So I was rooting for
Oh, wow.
after the
Nice
beginning. It's
day.
like if when I my cash lineup is up there, it's like I've I'm deviating in a lot of my lineups. So it's like I have pieces of this, but not like them all together in a way. So it's just like now I'm just rooting. I'm rooting for my remaining like four props in the afternoon games because they're tied because I round robin everything. So it's like when another one comes in, that's like another $1,500 in my pocket. Like kind of because it's like it's
Yeah.
attached to like 20 other things. So it's like I'm gonna get a 3x payout on like all of them at once. So I was good there. And all I did with the props, Neil, are the easiest thing, right? I tell people this, and people still are like they're asking me on Fridays and Saturdays. Like I literally, this is what I've been doing. Okay, literally, I do it in baseball, and now I'm doing it in NFL. NBA is going to be a little bit different beast because of injury news and stuff like that. But I just use the Blitz statistical projections, and Cardi puts out the initial ones Tuesday night, and I just find like, is there anything that's like, is there 50-yard passing yard props off? Are there rushing props 15, 20 yards plus off? Are there receiving ones that are 15, 20, 25 yards off? And I just like, I'll write them all down and then round robin them all. Typically takes me about maybe like I had what? I had a 20, I had 27, but Pitts didn't play. So that's a DNP, so you just get a refund on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had 27, and to round robin them all, like it took me about an hour or so. Of varying,
Nice.
some are $25, some are $50, some are $75, and then I put together $25 5-pick ones. And then once the Flex Friday comes around, right, because they make it 15x on Prize Picks,
Cool.
as part of the Flex, I just whatever's remaining that hasn't moved, right? Because by Friday, like I mean, like literally, like all the I won like out of the 26, because I don't count the well, actually I could say out of the 27. Which ones didn't? I might as well count the ones that didn't move, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So you're just looking at Cardi's projections versus the over under for certain props. That's all you're doing. You're not
Right,
even
but
looking at
it has to be a large discrepancy because you have to make
okay.
up
Yeah.
for the fact two things, and the two things that people don't get about Prize Picks and Underdog. Like these props, you need to have like a win rate of like 58% on them. So
Mm.
it's not like that they're a little off, and it's like imagine it was a little off and it was minus 105. It's like you could probably get a 1%, 2% edge on those if you're betting it straight with the sports book. But you have to make these fixed parlays that pay out, 3x, 2x winnings, 3x payout.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like they have to be minus 137 or better, pretty much.
Yeah.
So you need to find where on that distribution the 58th percentile is, and is it off that far? And then you also have to realize that DFS projections are almost always mean projections and not median projections.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was wondering about that because so I can't prop bet here in Minnesota, but I'm like, well, I would definitely use Odd Shopper if I did. They give actual expected ROI and percentage of time that it's going to hit. So I feel like they cover a lot of those kinds of things for you. Like,
Yeah,
kinda tells
Stochastic
you.
has stuff where you could compare it to Prize Picks and Underdog
Yeah.
and stuff like that also. So if you have statistical projections, but you have to realize the mean and medians are going to be different. That's why you need these larger discrepancies. So like if you see
Right.
a Prize Picks has a rushing prop of like 50 and a half, and like, oh well, I see 59 in the projections, like that's not big enough.
Right.
Because even if it was a median projection, you're probably right at that like 58% point. But then once
Yeah.
you factor in that you're looking at mean projections, not medians, like you're probably going to need like 64 or something to get past the line. Like I'm oddballing it because I mean if you
Right.
do just a generality of each stat and each level of you'll get it. Like you need probably around 40, 50 yards on passing. You probably need at least 12 to 15 yards on rushing and receiving. So like you're not looking for the little ones. So like the fact that remember they've props on Underdog and Prize Picks for like everything.
Right.
And I compare everything and I found 27 of them and one obviously didn't play. So imagine all the ones that there's no value in, and then once
Yeah.
they all move, and then people are like, "Oh, well, Saturday morning, what do you like?" I look at I like nothing. I read like, yeah. I'm fine with the Darnell Mooney at over 38 and a half, but he's now at 46 and a half. So like,
Right.
it's gone. I mean, yeah. I liked the Devin Singletary. Like people got burned on Devin Singletary. I think his prop opened at 40 and a half on Prize Picks, and then literally I think the 24 hours later was 51 and a half.
Oh wow.
And I think he ended up with like 47 rushing yards or something like that. So like those are the things that make the difference. So like I'm doing this every week. I've done this every week in NFL. I have not lost money.
Wow. I mean, that's unsustainable to never lose, I would think. I mean, obviously you're not going to win money every single week, but
Right.
we're 5 weeks in, so that's a nice little streak.
Right. And understand you have to win them all. Like when people sometimes they put these things together and go, I'm going to pay 4 picks, 3 picks, 5 picks. I'm going to find 5 and then put them all together and that's it. It's like, well, you could do that, but also have a put 1 and 2 together and then 1 and 3 together and then one.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't. If you're comfortable with like I have $300 that I want to spend, it's like, well, just put 1 and 2 for $20 and 1 and 3 for $20 and one and then put them all 5 together for another 20. So you get like a little bonus extra payout if you get them all right? Like
So
something like that.
I did kind of the opposite of what you've done. Stochastic has a partnership with No Advantage, which I learned recently that I can actually play some of these prop based contests, and they have they can build lineups for you. They have like a multi lineup generator on the site where you choose the prop and then you choose whether you want the over or under, and you can say like I have this much confidence in it, or I can put it in the high confidence spots or the low confidence spots, and then it'll just make random lineups for you with the information that you put in the props. You say like, but of course I did this chasing overlay with like literally 4 minutes before the slate was going to, I was like, holy shit, it's 50% overlay. I'm just going to go in and chase the overlay. So I went in and just like chose props at random, things that I thought like eyeball look good. But then of course you still have to win them is what I found out. And I lost like every single bet that I put in was wrong. So it was just like,
right.
I still lost all of my money. Even with all that overlay, you lose all your money if you
right. Cause you do that in DFS sometimes. Bets. I mean, like I'll enter satellites. I think I remember week two, which was a bad week for me. That like there was the soccer qualifiers like for the World Cup, like they run these 7-man $90 50 because you get a $5.55 ticket into the group stage, mega group stage, whatever kind of November 20th, whatever the first day is, and people don't play these other than like soccer people, I guess, and it's very often that they run with like only 3 or 4 people in it, and on week 2, I found one with like 2 minutes to go before lock, 1 of 7, and it was just me and the other person. What overlay that is? Great. I still lost. I lost the head to head, so it doesn't right. You could there's a lot of overlay. I'm going to play 150 lineups, and then you still lose, right? And
still got to make good lineups,
right? You still got you have a better shot if you did that all the time over the long run.
It'd be profitable, I'm sure.
Right, of course. Yeah. Right. So I want to highlight the prize picks. People don't do it. I'm okay. Leave it to me. I'll do it. I'll do it. No problem. This past week yesterday in NFL.
Yesterday.
The fact that my cash lineup was the highest scoring lineup means that if you were a contrarian player, you probably did not do well. But I wanna highlight. We'll talk a little bit about our decisions because you went a little bit. You took a stand on probably an off the board game, and I took a stand on a little bit of an off the board game. You got there more than I did. But yeah, I'll bring this point up after we talk about this.
Sure.
Did you expect the Brady stacks to be as owned as they were? Because I did, and I purposely, I went the no-brainer route. To me, 30% of my lineups, like, dude. The main reason I don't like playing chalk bills is because Josh Allen spreads the ball out more than people think, right? They go to all these, could be anyone, who knows. Knox is out, McKenzie's out, Crowder's out. Like they got practice squad. They basically got Diggs, Davis, Shakir, a practice squad guy, Quentin Morris at tight end. I mean, like they really don't got anyone. And other than Diggs and Davis, they're all cheap. So, like, they have the highest implied total on the slate at home. It's the Bills that run like 78% passing plays, and they typically are still throwing the ball up 4 touchdowns in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Why aren't I just jamming in Bills stacks? And truthfully, most of them didn't even have run backs. It's like they either had Pickens or Frymouth primarily, but like. Dude, if everyone's going to these Brady lineups, Like, just give me Allen plus Diggs plus Shakir. Or I didn't play Diggs and Davis together, but I played like Diggs and Shakir, Davis Shakir, Quentin Morris
Yep.
and Davis, quite like some
Yep. I had a lot of different
Singletaries,
combos.
right? Some Singletary lineups mixed in, and yeah, the Bills are going to be owned. It's not like oh my, you're off the board. It's just like I think the disparity between the Buccaneers and the Bills was going to be so wide that like I think these Bills are underowned. I think and
Yeah.
on any other slate, if you priced up Brady to like 6,800, Godwin to 6,700, and Evans to 7,400, I think especially when McKenzie goes out and you get Shakir there, I think everything goes to Allen. I think it was just like if
Yep.
Fournette
Probably.
was 7,800 instead of 6,900, it's just a matter of like multiple Buccaneers were underpriced, so people just like I'm just jamming them in as much as possible, and I just said, well, I'm just going to take the highest team total team and shove it down your ass, and of course you needed the right pieces around that
Yep.
to get there, but
So I did do the run back, which was a big mistake.
well, I mean, what was your main run bet? Was it Pickens?
I mean, it was whoever the optimizer gave me, but it was
Right.
primarily Pickens or Fryermuth, occasionally Deontay Johnson. I think a couple with Chase Claypool. So it was a mix of different guys.
Okay, which isn't bad or anything. It's just that
No,
I don't force in runbacks. I didn't force in runbacks with the Buccaneers either. When I would play Brady lineups with no London or no I would have a little bit of Zacchaeus or something like that. At least he's lower
yeah,
owned. Like you don't need to do that.
no, you
Um,
don't. But so I mean, so my thinking was, well, there's a 14-point spread. If the Bills are going to be trying to score at all in the fourth quarter, it's probably because the Steelers have at least scored a couple touchdowns, and it was a decision point. We talked about a lot on the shows this week whether you really needed to, and at the time I was saying I think I'll probably do some with the run back, some without, probably do a mix. But then of course Sunday morning, I have limited time. I didn't want to spend the time doing multiple different lineup sets, so I ultimately just said, screw it. I'm just going to have the run back here. I'm not going to worry about like groups or anything like that. I'm just going to say yes to the run back as the decision I made, which of course I regretted in retrospect. But what are you going to do?
yeah, I don't even think of if they're gonna do whatever. Just like are the Bills gonna put up 5 touchdowns? Just give them to me. Like kind of
Sure.
like that meme that you see on Twitter with the normal distribution curve with like the middle of like
The
oh
smart
well
guy
what
in
they
the
need
yeah.
pushing whatever, and then you see like just Bills Burr put up a lot of points, and like the Bills score regardless of when like I'm just
Yeah. And
like
I
the
guess I'm
Bills,
the guy in the middle.
right.
The Bills will only score points if Pittsburgh scores points. Yeah.
Right, and the same thing with the Buccaneers. It's just okay. They just throw it, but whatever. But the game
Yeah.
that I was way over on was the game that ended up with the lowest score. Always
Yeah.
fun when that happens. Always fun when you're playing Trevor Lawrence, when Christian Kirk has a 6% target share in a game. Right? It's
Oh,
always
did he
it's
really? I
always fun
didn't.
when Brandon Cooks is sitting there with 3 catches on 16 yards. Right? It's always fun when you see a lot of those lineups, especially with lineups that have like 5% owned running backs that have 30 plus points, and you're like, what could have been? What could have been? But I thought where you went was I truthfully think it was sharp. I didn't get there as much because I was focused so much on do I go to another game like that or do I just make this a Josh Allen lineup? like it just came down to like I just want these Josh Allen lineups. Just jam in the Josh Allen lineups, especially in the weaker fields. They're not going to react to the clear Shakir Isaiah McKenzie
Yeah.
news. So
True.
like I'm just jamming. But I totally was. I said on the Game Theory podcast on the show on Roto Grinders, it's like I have the 3 overs. Like the 3 blitz overs that I had in a correlated 5 picks were Fields, Mooney, and Komet. So I'm like, why don't I just they're playing in Minnesota. Maybe this is the game that the Bears actually have to pass, right?
Yep.
The Vikings are pass first now more than you
Yep.
think.
Not a
So
great defense for the Vikings.
right. So why can't I just play Fields, Mooney, Komet, Jefferson, or
Yep.
Cook in that? So I think I had 1 or 2 of those types of lineups, but you, I mean, that was if yeah, your number one stack was Josh Allen, right? Based on
Yep.
exposure and everything like that. But your next, you had Cousins, 15% Cousins and 11% Fields. So like a quarter of your lineups were focused around that game. And truthfully, even though I all of that went because you had 16% Josh Allen and I had like 30% Josh Allen. So basically, I just took all of that
Would
and
have
said,
preferred that.
right,
Yeah.
I'm just like, let me just bore it into Josh Allen. But yes, and I think that game was exceptionally underowned. Especially like, I mean, you have Justin Jefferson, you have Dalvin Cook, you have guys. Darnell Mooney could break one. You got people that the game could blow up.
Yeah.
And it did much more than the Texans Jaguars game,
Sure. It was a
right?
fine
I
game.
mean, you must have been happy when Justin Jefferson has like 100 yards in a quarter,
Yeah.
right?
The problem is he just didn't score the touchdown. I mean, he got down. They called it a touchdown initially, and it got called back. Like he needed to do. Nobody did quite enough to like break the slate like Gabe Davis did. I mean, Cook had 2 touchdowns, but I think he had 2 more opportunities for touchdowns. So he had 26 fantasy points, which is great at 7,300, but could have been so much more. And Jefferson, I guess Jefferson had 33 fantasy points, so I guess that is kind of slate breaking. But I feel like there could have been more. The Vikings were a little bit more spread out in the scoring, so that nobody, other than I guess Jefferson to an extent, nobody really was slate breaking.
Right, because there's not much to say about like your just overall. Were you shocked to see the ownership of the New England running backs?
I think I was with the field there,
Yeah, I
so
mean, you
yeah,
ended up a little over the field, but I mean,
yeah. It was the matchup with Detroit. Yeah, I expected them to come in a little bit lower owned, although we did have them both projected for double digit ownership. So it was about where we projected them to be. I guess I was kind of wishful thinking with a lot of moving parts at running back that people would go down to Tyler Algier or go to some other spots. I was hoping the ownership projections were a little bit off because I thought the spot against Detroit was so good and people typically don't love playing the split backfield. So I thought maybe the ownership projections were off. So, I mean, I can't say I was too shocked given that they were right around where we had them projected. A little bit, I guess a little bit over. We had Harris at 12.5%. He came in at 18%. We had Ramondre at 14%. He came in at 17. So, not shocked, but yeah, it was. I would have preferred that they came in a little bit lower.
and the play of the day, the talked up play of the day, which I had. I don't even know if I have a single lineup with him. James Robinson, 21% owned in the Millie. He was like the 16th salary adjusted value player in industry aggregated projections, and good. I that's why I listen to stuff. My aggregate ownership was 6. I just made that 16. He came in at 21. Uh, these are the players that I don't get why sharper people play because it doesn't even reflect it in the projections. Like I don't like Penny last week was at least like ninth in the running back. Like if you sorted by RGV or salary adjusted value, it was ninth. It's like okay,
Sure.
that's within the realm of whatever. Okay, I get it. And he's also cheap and allowed you to do a lot of other stuff. But James Robinson was 6,300. Why is he what? Dude, Leonard Fournette was 14%. I had Leonard Fournette at 24. My ownership was 24 on him. And I'm like, I ended up with like 27% of it. It's like, how do I temper down my Leonard Fournette lineups, not realizing that, dude, I maybe I should have had him in half my lineups if I knew he was only going to be 14% owned. I
That's
mean,
true.
like, James, the highest owned running backs, on, let me get out of your exposures, the highest owned running backs in the Millie. Okay? Number 1, James Robinson, 21%. Number 2, Damian Harris, 17. Number 3, Stevenson, 17. Number 4, Nick Chubb, 16. Then Jeff Wilson, 16. Then Fournette, 14. Then Kamara, 14. And I'm looking going, dude, the 2 best projected plays are Fournette and Kamara.
Yeah.
Like what? Like, why am I'm building lineups going, well, I need to play someone different because I have Kamara or Fournette in my lineup. And it's like, no, actually, it should have been, since I played 0 Chubb and 0
Right.
Robinson, that I shouldn't even care about the running back ownership at all because this is ridiculous. And also, just to show the disparity here, okay? And this is the general topic that I kind of wanted to talk about today. which we've talked about before. If I look at the difference, I'm in results DB looking at the Wildcat.
Okay.
Okay, which is still it's I'm not looking at single entry stuff. So it's still a multi-entry contest, but it's a 333, so it's sharper, right?
Yeah.
Uh here's the ownership. Okay, so we had the Millie, okay? Robinson 21, Harris 17, Stevenson 17, Chubb 16, Wilson 16, Fournette 14, Kamara 14. Okay? So the highest owned running back in the Wildcat was Jeff Wilson Jr. at 26. He was 16 in the Millie. Then Leonard Fournette, 23. Right? He was 14 in the Millie. Kamara was the third one, 21% owned. He was 14 in the Millie. Then Stevenson and Harris, 17 and 16, so that's very similar. Then Dalvin Cook at 15 in the Wildcat. He was 11 in the Millie. Then Breece Hall was 13 in the Wildcat, and he was 9 in the Millie. And then we get to James Robinson as 11%, which is much in line with projection. That is much more appropriate. But he was 21 in the Millie. And Nick Chubb was 8.9% in the Wildcat, but 16.8 in the Millie. So I'm looking at this going the ownership in the Wildcat is more of what I expected. This is
that sounds more like what I was expecting too.
Right, this is what I expected. And then in the Millie, you get all of this inefficient shit that happens because of casual, much more weaker opponents and everything that I get because I listen to the review show, the Stochastic review show, and a lot of you guys, maybe not you, jammed the shit out of Brady, right?
Yeah,
Played a shit ton of Brady stacks, but the thing is that what's been in football for for the Millie, and I'm talking about Millie, the play action. I mean, really large field stuff, weak opponents, not the slant. The quote best projected plays are just never owned enough, are just not used enough.
That's
the
true.
Wildcat that's true. They are used enough, but in these Millie contests, and then the non-projected chalk is way higher in the Millie than in the Wildcat. So guys
James Robinson being your example there, yeah.
Right, Robinson and Chubb. I mean, to me, both of them in general. I mean, just if you were to listen and see mainstream content over the past week, the two most talked about running backs, I would say the three most talked about running back situations. This is what was talked about. Okay, the Jaguars are 7-point favorites, and based on the first two games, when they have a lead, they just hammer James Robinson.
Right.
Okay, well, that's assuming they have a lead. I mean, still the Jaguars. So you're assuming too much, and you're also not taking into account that they got Travis Etienne there also. Yeah. That is much more talented. And then the second talking point that I heard on some stuff and read on some stuff is the Lions' rushing offense is so weak that in mainstream content, people were like, at their prices, maybe I could play both of them in my lineup. Okay.
So I guess I need to start listening to some more mainstream content.
Right, and then the third, then you know what the other talk, the third biggest talking point at running back, Nick Chubb. Right, mainstream people love playing Nick Chubb. Right.
Yeah.
If he's in a good spot, if they're favored and they're good spot, high total. The Chargers. What's the narrative on the Chargers? We'll let you run the ball 5 yards at a time as long as you don't beat us in the pass. That's the narrative. It's factored in the projections. Chubb barely gets any receiving work, and he splits half the backfield touches. That's why he never projects well from a median standpoint, and most sharp players don't have Nick Chubb in their lineups most weeks. And he's always owned. If he's 4% owned, I had a ton of Derrick Henry, but I'm fine with Derrick Henry at low ownership, not Nick Chubb at 16% owned or anything. And then the other talking point was Rashad White with the Buccaneers.
Sure.
Is Lenny going to get all the work? Is whatever, all that? So it's like, so you heard a lot of, maybe I'm going to fade Fournette and play Robinson or go up and play Chubb. Now, if you listen to sharper shows, such as ones on Roto Grinders and Stochastic, you would hear it's a weird thing, Neil. You have to listen to these things in context. They're bubble. We have bubbles here.
Yep.
Okay? So if you're just contained to the mainstream content bubble, you're typically someone that does not have access to projections, right? Typically does not subscribe to a site of any type, doesn't build your own. You're reading Yahoo Sports and CBS whatever. You're listening to the fantasy footballers, which, I mean, they're fine. They're a mainstream fantasy football podcast. But you're looking for the best plays. You have no numbers to go with anything. You're just a wide receiver cornerback matchups and DVOA garbage that doesn't matter. And then if you pay attention to that content, people are like, well, Fournette's good, but maybe you hear Robinson, Chubb, the New England running backs, and that type of stuff. Yet in our bubble, where we're just like, dude, you do a first look show, and we're just like, oh, let's look at the initial project. This guy projects well. This guy projects well. This guy doesn't project as well as I thought he would. And like, that's what a lot of the content is in our bubble, because we are looking at what the models are saying, and then trying to come up with things of like, well, his median projection is low, but here's a way that maybe his projection is fragile. And then we
work around the projections and the ownership projections. We're working around the data that we have and trying to figure out narratives of, whether we like it or not, but using that as a starting point.
Right. So we're looking and going, well, James Robinson doesn't really project that well, but his projection is kind of fragile depending on how much work the backfield gets and how much of a lead the Jaguars will have. So maybe if the Jaguars get a 2-touchdown league and Robinson is one of those touchdowns, he sees 25 carries or something, and our ownership says that he's going to be 6% owned. So like, why does the ownership say that? Because he doesn't project well. I mean, like, we're in this bubble, and then Nick Chubb never projects well, and he's still always 6 to 8% owned at minimum. So it's like he never gets into any lineup. And then I see that when he's 16%, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't play zero. That's why I played zero of him.
Yeah.
But it's all based on the bubbles that we're in. So our leverage plays in our bubble may end up be the chalk play in another bubble, right? I'm sure there's a bubble out there that was like Alvin Kamara is not getting the, he's not the same Alvin Kamara that with Drew Brees.
And not people were smart enough to play Taysom Hill instead.
Right. Yeah, of course. On FanDuel, you could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not on DraftKings. You're not gonna give up a quarterback spot, right?
Yeah.
But do you get what I'm saying? Is that in like the Millie type contests, the play action, the more weaker field contests, ownership is much more subject to like casual narratives.
Yeah.
While if you played like the slant or you're playing small field stuff or the spies or the power sweeps, that's where James Robinson may be worth playing at 11% owned, but like at 21, I mean, I played Damian Harris in some lineups thinking that he was leverage off of Ramondre Stevenson, because Stevenson easily projected better than him. And I figure that most smart people at least, are not dumb enough to play two running backs from the same team in the lineup, because that totally eats ceiling from each other. Yeah, from a median standpoint, sure, you could do that, but not from a ceiling standpoint. So I'm like, well, based on these projections, I'm assuming Stevenson's going to be 20% owned and Harris is going to be 10% owned. So I'm going to play Harris as leverage on Stevenson and not realize that Harris actually came in more owned because people thought that meme. People thought it's like, Patriots have lead, Damian Harris run ball, right? Like, he's the guy that, Stevenson catches more passes, but Damian Harris is the one, they're up 3 touchdowns. We're just going to give it to him every play, especially with Bailey Zappi at quarterback. So, like, you see these narratives there, and, like, the projections weren't bad on either of them. But like Jeff Wilson Jr., it's like Jeff Wilson Jr. is a projection play. That's not a
Yeah,
sexy
100%.
49ers running back. Like, oh, I mean, I heard it. I heard it on podcasts. I know Jeff Wilson got like 97% of the work last week, but it's Kyle Shanahan. They got Juice Jack there. Debo, like this historical 49ers narrative of like they don't really give one person the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So like just it doesn't matter that his price is only 5,500. Yeah, if he was 7,500, that yeah, I get it. Right? So you hear that, and then you get like Dameon Pierce. It's like Dameon Pierce is the second coming of everything. It's like, dude, we have a sample size of 4 games. Right? So
Yep.
I think being aware of the bubbles. I think that's the is that the name of the podcast this week? The bubbles.
I like it. The bubbles. Let's go with it. Yeah, I think. I mean, you've obviously always been pretty good at checking around the industry, looking at projections and ownership projections around the industry. And apparently, I need to listen to some more mainstream stuff to get a better idea of what other people are thinking. Obviously, the footballers, as you say, is a great example of that. I'm in some group chats where we just talk a lot of football, and those guys are super into the footballers. And I don't know, I've never really gotten into it, but they love it. So maybe I need to listen to it just to know, because definitely I can hear when I talk to just friends of mine who are casual at this, like it does influence them a lot. Like just what they say on that show, they're always bringing up. Well, the baller said this, the baller said that, and it's
it's the most listened to fantasy football podcast.
Yeah. So maybe it is worth it for me to listen to it just from that perspective of this is what other people are thinking right now.
Right. So I go I get a notification. I get an email of like the Yahoo Sports articles and everything. Am I reading it for like information? No, I'm just skimming through and going, okay, okay, and then going on another tab, okay, whatever. And I'm reading all the. I mean, I read the stochastic articles. I read the RG stuff. That's what I do throughout the. I mean, that's what I mean. I podcast on all the time, so I'm just like, am I doing anything scientific? No. Am I going? Oh well, I'm tallying it up here, and no, I'm just like over the course from Tuesday through Saturday, just getting a sense of because I'm doing what are they talking about? Because I'm not going to change. I'm not changing the player projections, right? Yeah. I'll change the ownership projections. Then I look at the ownership projections and I go, do the people making these ownership projections know? Does the algorithm behind this know that everyone and their mothers talked about James Robinson, especially in mainstream podcasts? And then you look at the non-mainstream stuff, and it's like James Robinson's the leverage play. I'm like, this is bump him up, bump up these New England backs. I always bump up Nick Chubb at least 2 to 4 percentage. Oh, it projected 6% owned, no 10% owned. Like that, there's no way. But the things that I got wrong were like Fournette and Kamara. I had both over 20% projected owned, and that's the reason why I played a shit ton of Derrick Henry. Right? That was the main reason. I mean, that Derrick Henry, first off, Derrick Henry could get 50 points in any game, right? He's Derrick fucking Henry. And I don't think models, unless ones that regress much more recent data, realize that Derrick Henry is getting as much pass catching work as Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
Is getting as much, not as much as Kamara, not as much as Fournette, but I mean, getting more than some of the guys that, I mean, not as much as McCaffrey, but definitely more than like Antonio Gibson or Najee Harris or James Conner. Or, I mean, like, dude, Henry probably, I mean, I'm pulling numbers out of my ass. I wouldn't be surprised if Henry is top 5 in running back receiver target share.
Target share.
Right, because who do the Titans have to throw the ball to?
Well, yeah, nobody.
Right. So and they design. Anytime I see Henry on red zone, on some type of 15-yard play, it's always this designed screen or inside something that normally a tight end would run. And it's like these aren't dump offs. Like these aren't like, oh, Tannehill goes back, looks for a couple of receivers, and then Henry's there to catch the outlet. It's like no, he was the first read. So to me, that screams like I hope people still think that Derrick Henry is Nick Chubb, is the one kind of one-dimensional type of running back, which I'm still fine with because he could bust off 180 yards. So you can still play him at that point.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and Nick Chubb had a period last year where he was very involved in the passing game early on, and then they kind of went away from it later on in the season. So there's that slight concern, but yeah, if he's going to continue to be this involved in the passing game, which maybe he's more likely this year, especially with Traylon Burks out, definitely an interesting play. Of course, I made the mistake of trying to play some of those receivers from that game, the Kyle Phillips and Nick Westbrook Akine, and I think went to some Austin Hooper, and they all sucked. Those didn't get anything. I think Westbrook Akine had one long play, but in general, not a great
Yeah,
play.
I played some Robert Woods. I think I may have had one lineup with Kyle Phillips in it, maybe. I mean, he was in my pool. He was available to be in lineups, at
Yeah.
least. But yeah, it would the way my exposures were outside of the Texans Jags game. I feel like, I mean, dude, the Millie winning lineup was a 2v2 off of my cash lineup. I mean, if you replace Chris Olave with Gabe Davis, and you replace Tyler Higbee with Kate Otten, that's the lineup.
Yep.
And that lineup is absolutely, like, if that was someone's cash lineup, I'd be like, Gabe Davis is an interesting choice for cash games at 6,400, but he correlates with Allen, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like you'd look at that lineup and go, if you played that in like a single entry, if you played that in the spy, I'd be like, okay, perfectly fine lineup there, right? And then you didn't even have to play Godwin. You could have played Olave instead of Godwin, because
I
Godwin
think the
was
lesson to be
200
learned
more.
is just play cash lineups.
Oh yeah, that's the takeaway. Just play cash lineups.
They just project so well. Weeks like this, they just crush everything.
But the point that I was making before, I think people in the weakest fields, because we're going to be coming up to NBA, and it's why doesn't it apply? People think in terms in NBA like that. I mean, at least sharper players, right? And I think the sharpest players in DFS for the weakest fields think like that also. Because I mean, I remember talking. I mean, I did a show with Brandon Adams for what 2 or 3 years, and a
Hmm.
lot of times he would say that in the largest field contests, like like you're overthinking it. It's like just capitalize on other people's mistakes. It's like you want to do that in the smaller or the mid fields or the sharper field. All bless you. Like he says that's absolutely good. I mean, he agrees with me completely. But he said, but
Yeah.
on these like mega large field with weak field casual opponents, it's like they make bad lineups. Just make the
Yeah.
best lineups. That doesn't mean you're making cash lineups, but
I
it's
mean,
like
there's definitely like Chris Godwin yesterday to me was an example of a play that was like he projects so well. I'm getting him everywhere, but should I just play him everywhere because the field we don't have him projected for that much ownership, and he clearly just projects so well. Yeah, we definitely see some examples of that, but I feel
But
like
you
there
see it
are
in, but Neil, you see it in NBA. I mean, like, dude,
yeah
how often? I mean, you'll take a look at some slates where injury news happens, and all the shot you'll go like some. There'll be like two guys that, or one. There'll be one guy that, like, you do a cross section on results DB or lineup rewind or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm going to look at these 12 sharp players' exposures, and across the board on 12, you like it's like 96. Some people it's 100. Some people it's 98.2%, right, of this one guy.
yeah.
And it's like, what was his own? But why did they just jam the chalk? Yeah, because he was only 73% owned.
Yeah, it
And then
makes
you
more
go, what
sense
do
in
you mean by
NBA.
only? It's like, yeah, because he should have been 90% owned. Like,
Well, especially with late swap though. I guess even before late swap, there are scenarios where there's like a $4,000 point guard who you should be playing in every lineup. But then, especially with late swap in NBA, it's just like you just know not enough people are going to react, so you just jam in whoever projects well
but you know
after
that
the surprise
before.
inactive late.
But Neil, you know
Sometimes,
that before. I'm talking about the weakest fields. Like if
sure,
you're
okay,
playing the smaller field, if you're playing mid-sized field, if you're playing sharper field, mid stakes, higher stakes, I could see going like, well, in these fields, this guy may actually be 90% owned, right? Like
right,
he's at equilibrium. Maybe now it's more viable to not play them and get the big projection sacrifice. But like you have to take a look at some of these ownerships and go, Fournette at 14% is underowned, and Kamara's 14 is under like dude, if I known this ownership, like you would have saw my lineups and be like, wow, chalk donkey, right? But it's like,
Right.
but it's not the chalk. Robinson, Chubb, Harris, and Stevenson, they were the chalk, and my cash lineup has Fournette, Wilson, and Hall in it. And I could have
Yeah.
played Kamara, right? So like those like dude, it ended up that the cash lineup was underowned. When typically you'd look in any other time and go, well, I obviously can't play this in GPP. It's like, well, you could play the parts of them in GPP. I mean, like, I'm never like X out chalk or anything. It's just that you play them much more precise. You know, you try to build around. But
Yeah.
for these large field, I mean, I'm looking at this ownership going, I would have just jammed the fuck out of Fournette. I would have just jammed the fuck out of Kamara. I would have just
Yeah.
jammed the fuck out of some of these people. And
Yep.
and I would have looked at the Josh Allen lineups, and I look at the let's look at the team. Okay, filter by team. This is the Millie. I'm gonna go Buffalo in the Millie, and I'm gonna do the Buffalo in the Wildcat. Okay, so in the Wildcat, okay,
Yep.
Allen 14%, Diggs 17, Shakir 13, Gabe Davis 5. Okay, those are the main pieces, I guess. In the Millie, Allen was 12, right? So 2% point less. Diggs was 17, so he was about the same. Gabe Davis was actually higher owned, 7. And that's probably because of projections, because Davis never projects well because he doesn't get that big of a target share.
Yeah.
Khalil Shakir is 13.8 in the Wildcat. He was 8% in the Millie. So that's a dramatic enough difference that, like, why aren't you just jamming in Allen, Diggs, Shakir, David? Why would, I mean,
Yeah.
like people are overthinking that type in the Millie. Like I said, if you're not playing if you're not playing large field stuff, because I don't even consider this for the slant. The slant, like if I went to the slant, do we have the slant up here? Yeah, the slant. So let me take a look at the slant. Because of its flatter payout structure, and there's only 26,000 entries into it, and a lot of people 150. So like this tends to be a much sharper field. If we go to the running back position, and let's take a look at here's the running back position for the slant. Ownership wise, Wilson 21, Kamara 21, Fournette 21, Stevenson 17, Harris 14, Hall 13, Cook 13, Robinson 13, Nick Chubb 8. Right? It's like flipped completely.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Buffalo lineups and you go Diggs 15, Allen 13, Shakir 12, Davis 6. So it's like much more efficient, much more efficient
Yeah.
in the slant because it's a sharper field and less casual participation, I guess, even though it's a $9 contest. So I think, I'm fine taking a look at some of these sharper MME players that are just like, I'm just gonna jam chalk and I'll build different lineups for the Wildcat. I'll buy different lineups for whatever. But even in NFL, that's much higher variance. Now, obviously, the Godwin and Evans, like the Brady stack, was overowned. I'm not sure anyone predicted that Godwin would be 27 and Evans would be 23, and Fournette would only be 14. But like the heuristic of people in the Millie just play really bad lineups on average. So why don't I just, as long as there's correlation and some amount of 2v2, some amount of relative value,
Yeah.
I'm jamming 150 lineups with, just chalk combinations and
Do you
there
think
you
this
go.
week was an outlier though? I mean, I totally take your point that if the field is going to be, under owning the top plays, I don't know if that happens every week. I think there are weeks where the chalk is just terrible and like people way overeat the guys that project well. Um, but I also think that to some extent, the ownership projections were pretty spread out this week. We didn't have anybody who was projected for like 40% ownership. I think that when we get those really high ownership projections, that's when it's more likely that, the casuals are also seeing that and eating that ownership more often than not. So I don't know if this was a total outlier, but I think that there was maybe more discrepancy here than there usually is in terms of the field just not playing the top projected plays.
Did you see the pricing for this coming week?
I haven't looked at it yet.
Oh, you're gonna look at it and go, yeah, this is gonna be a GPP player's dream. Uh,
Yeah,
it's it's gonna be a cash player's nightmare and a GPP player's
nice.
dream. Uh, and people think the opposite. Okay, when you look at the pricing, you're gonna think the opposite. You're gonna go, wow, it's gonna be so easy to build a cash lineup. But that's not the best weeks for cash players are when the pool of players is small. Okay? So like if you're like this past week, truthfully, on DraftKings, there weren't many cash lineups to play. Right? It's like you chose one of a couple and you probably scored somewhere between 180 and 221. Right? Uh and then you're entering double ups and playing head to heads and you're just waiting for people to make mistakes. Right? Those are the best cash weeks. The weeks where it's like, I don't like my lineup. I need to use this $4,100 player just to fit in anything that looks decent. More of the field is going to dupe that are sharp, and then the people that are off that lineup are typically making very significant mistakes. So, like,
Mhm.
most people look at those weeks and go, wow, it's really tough to build a cash lineup, right? I really have to make concessions. I'm not comfortable. And then a lot of people think that's the GPP week of like, it's like, no, that means it's efficient, more efficient pricing. And efficient pricing is very, very bad for GPPs because as long as you spend all your salary, your lineup is not going to be that much different from other people's lineups. This coming week, it's like they took last week's pricing and just never changed it. Like
Huh.
the amount of like I tried to build a cash lineup based on. Obviously I don't even have projections, but just based on the totals that we have now and the positions, it's like, dude, I could probably make 20 lineups that would say this is a really pretty good cash lineup, and it has multiple different players in it. It like has all different players in it. I could play Josh Allen. I could play Todd. I could play Brady. I could play Geno Smith in this line. I could play 7 different running backs. It seems like 6 or 7 running backs are like 500 to 1,000 too cheap, and
Hmm.
then there's like 5 or 6 wide receivers that seem 5 or 1,000 too cheap, and it's like so. My pool of players for cash is going to be like instead of being like 17 players, it'll be like 28 players, which means whatever I'm gonna do this 3v3 and maybe I lose by 60 points. I mean, like it'll be one of those weeks where you look at the lineups that win in cash and go, yeah, that's completely viable. I get that. I could have played that lineup also, but I chose this one because the projection difference. You're gonna see. I'm gonna run the top 20 optimals and see
Mhm.
that like the top 20 are like 4v4s of each other. I mean, like the top. That's what I
Wow.
expect. But that also means that in GPPs there are a lot more combinations of players for you
Yeah,
to
will
use
project well.
that project well, right? And then there'll also be a lot of players that compared to that group of people that project significantly worse, which means, yeah, maybe you don't play all of these 28 players in this box, but maybe you mix in one of those, 1 or 2 of those in there, and then still primarily build around these 28 because the ownership should be spread out enough that you're not like building around a 35% owned running back.
Right.
Unless something gets talked, unless Saquon Barkley at 7,700 all of a sudden appears as everyone's top play, or Joe Mixon at 6,900 is like one of those guys is going to be like de facto, you got to play them. And the other guy is going to be like, that's the pivot. And you have to decide what the ownership is going to be. Is it going to just steam one way or steam the other way? Like it's going to be one of those weeks. But dude, I think you could plug in whatever you played in cash this past week is probably a good cash lineup for this coming week. Like literally, like I think everyone that is on the slate. I think I could play my cash line, my Allen Hall, uh,
Allen.
like Wilson's up to 6,200. Like you play Lockett's still 5,600. Godwin is like 6,100. Like they didn't really move anyone. Olave, if he's back from concussion, is still what his price is. I mean, like Higbee's 4,600 and not 4,300 now.
Oh, so you can't play. Doesn't look like you're going to be able to play the exact same lineup.
No, but I mean, but it looks almost like it looks like you're looking. I see you. You're looking at the
I
pricing right
am. I'm
now.
looking at yeah, exactly. I'm actually entering exactly your lineup to see what comes out if I can play everybody. Allen, Hall, Wilson, Godwin, Lockett, Higbee, I'm trying to think who else here. Wide receiver.
Olave, Godwin,
Oh yeah, Olave, who might not even be in the field right
Fournette.
now.
Like Fournette got a price bump to 7,400.
Yeah, so let's see. Yep, can't play it. Now we only have $600 left over for the defense. You're
Right,
gonna have to make some concessions here.
right. But the difference is that if you look at FanDuel's pricing, it's much tighter. Like usually it's the other way around of like, oh, FanDuel, you can kind of play whoever you want there. And it's
Yeah,
like, no, it seems like DraftKings this week is play whoever you want. I look at FanDuel and go, yeah, I would putting together a cash line. I've been like, yeah, I'm going to have to make a concession somewhere at one of these spots in order to fit something in that is somewhat reasonable.
it's also Monday, and probably something will change by game day. There's going to be an injury that's going to affect who you want to play in your lineup anyway.
Well, it depends on what, like, if Connor's out, do we all play Eno Benjamin? Then we have also Penny's out. Is Kenny Walker going to
Yeah.
be, value du jour? I mean, depending on that backfield, I'm not sure if that's going to project as well as people think because they have DJ Dallas there anyway. Uh,
Travis Homer.
right. But I think, no, Travis Homer's on the IR.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right actually.
Right. But I mean, yeah, you're right. There are there are other situations that come out, but just in general, you look and I go, wow, there's a lot of people that seem underpriced based on like the same people we looked at this past week are like, well, Tyler Lock is only 5,600. Got to play him. He projects well, and then the next week it's like, oh, he's 5,600 again. Like, why wouldn't he project it to be the same as last week? And okay, I guess I'm playing him again. Like, okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
I mean it's not the worst thing in the world, as you've said many times. Not the worst thing in the world for GPP players if there's soft pricing. It'll piss a lot of people off. Some people will look at it and be like, "What the hell are you doing, DraftKings?" And then ultimately, it just benefits good players.
Right, it benefits good. If it was efficient, if everyone was always, if you play a 50K lineup and on average got the same amount of points as anyone else, it would just be a lottery with a 15% rake.
We all lose the rake. Yep.
Right. So anything else? Anything going on your end?
Nope. Just still doing a ton of content as we've talked about. Doing another show later tonight on the Monday Night Football slate. I don't think anything else has really changed though.
Yeah, short show then.
How about you?
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean it's been an hour. This is what we shoot for, right? Just the hour.
Right, and then it turns
I guess
out
we're a
that
little bit late.
I talk a whole bunch more about stuff. I was like, okay, it is
Yeah, a lot.
it is
A lot
what
of
it
the time
is.
we do end up going longer. But yeah,
Uh, I'm trying to throw in some special guests throughout midweek. Hopefully, getting someone for NBA. Uh,
it's coming up.
it's coming up. It's coming up. And yeah. So, theory of daily fantasy sports. Right? Did people look? People will look at the record at the time and go, like, what did a bomb explode in the middle, or like did they just like a fire? We're done. We're done with the podcast. Right? We gotta cut out. But some people,
Yeah, it's
some
short.
people,
It's relative, but we shoot for an hour. It's typically like we want to get to about an hour, and then usually we go a little bit long. But that's kind of the goal.
okay. Theory of daily fantasy sports. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass, as well as the advanced course. 10 chapters, 6 hours of audio, plus all of the Excel tools, the portfolio trimmer, the duplication predictor and checker, and the lineup simulator, and the portfolio correlation matrix, the contest analyzer, the everything. We got a ton of stuff that you could just use in Microsoft Excel that'll help you build plus EV lineups and the teachings in the chapters on how to do just that. So go check that out. Go pick that up. Theoryofdfs.com.